you very much for having me here, and thanks Maria and the ESPON team for inviting me to this conference. It's very nice to be back. I will show you some thoughts. I hope you can see the presentation. Just trying to make it full. So, can you see the slides?
Yes, Peter.
Okay, thanks. I just want to step back a little bit and show you some of the history and the characteristics of tourism. And tourism as we know it now, of course, only started after the Second World War, but we can trace it back a bit longer. And I think the first appearance of a kind of tourism was in the 17th century when the English upper class and later on also the European upper class and the aristocratic classes started the grand tour through Europe. Of course, the English were looking for the culture and the landscape in Italy and Greece mainly, and they traveled as part of their classical education through Europe and to Italy and the Mediterranean and the early culture of Europe, so to say. And later on, the other affluent middle classes followed this path. Of course, every school child in Germany knows the travels of Goethe in the late 18th century to Italy. This tradition came to an end when the early mass tourism started around 1860. And for this early industrialization, for this early tourism, industrialization was the main driving force in two ways. First of all, the industrial city had very poor living conditions, and whoever could make it tried to escape them, at least temporarily. And second, we had the infrastructure now. We had the invention of rail and steamship, and this made the temporary escape possible. So tourism at that time starts to trickle down from aristocracy to the upper middle classes, and eventually now today to virtually everyone. Of course, this from the beginning was regretted by those who lost their previous privileges. I cite this observation of one of the upper class members of England, Alexander Innes Shand, who wrote this already in 1903. 40 years ago, he says, there were cozy hotels in Switzerland, but no unruly masses. In those days, tourists were comparatively rare and there were no cheap trippers. So he talks about 1850, 1860.
Peter, your slides are not moving.
What do you see? What slide?
The first one.
Okay.
So you have to put it in presentation mode.
Oh, yes, Peter. I was thinking this was some sort of introduction because we are still at page 1.
Okay. I start. I try to start it again. So. So it says to me that it should work now.
Yeah, we see all-time travel book.
Okay, this is fine. So what I showed you very quickly is this first slide of the very early days of the Grand Tour. The second slide of the first early days of tourism in around 1850 as part of industrialization, of capitalist industrialization. This enabled tourism for the first time. And then we are at the good old times. You can see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we see it.
Okay. So again, Alexander Inshant in 1903 complains that the changes in the last 50 years have been marvelous, and the old-time tourist would feel lost and mystified where he landed now in 1900 at Basel or Geneva. Railways traverse the length and breadth of the land. Tunnels are being driven through the bowels of the Alps. Lifts have been fitted to the hills wherever a solitary eminence offers commanding points of view. Magnificent hotels have been springing up everywhere. Rude shelter huts have been turned into commodious inns. The playground of Europe, he talks about Switzerland, has been swamped with sightseers. So this could have written now, this was written in 1900, and it shows that also already then the first time, the first wave of tourism, so to say, was very ambivalent for those who were the first tourists. This narrative of a lost paradise, which actually is a lost privilege of richer classes, is the recurring theme, the basso continuo, so to say, of the nostalgia which tourism brings about, which is part of the narrative until today. Already in a very first phase in 1958, so very, very early phase of the current tourism wave of the last 70 years, Hans Magnus Enzensberger wrote a very nice essay developing these dialectics of tourism. He says tourism, and in particular culture and nature-oriented tourism, tends to change or even destroy the character of what it seeks, the experience of nature, the authentic way of life in foreign cities, the immersion into other times and cultures. So places become tourist places, and by this change their identity or even lose their identity. You already mentioned Venice. Maybe this is an actual example where we could discuss these observations right now. But this, be careful, this does not mean that the tourism system would be in danger to destroy itself. On the contrary, tourism is constantly reinventing itself, widening its scope, looking for new places and looking for places that are not until now affected by tourism, at least not by over-tourism, which we would say today. So currently visitors are reinventing the destinations nearer to home. This we have seen, there are a lot of studies who show this, that during the Corona summer, the range of visiting shrank from international to regional and local destinations. In my view, this is only a temporary thing, not a long-term thing, but we can discuss this later. And after all, tourism is an economic sector of very high complexity. So there are a lot of typologies of travelers, and I don't want to go into details here at this time, but what I want to say is that even within the sector of culture-oriented heritage tourists, there are different types of travelers, and we can attach to these types different effects and consequences. For instance, let me see the traditionalist, of course. They seem to be the very prototypical tourist who goes to cultural places, who is educated middle class, who is interested in all kinds of historical events, be it music, be it architecture, whatever. And he's the one who can be guided in a way by tourism programs and by tourist officials. But there are many other kinds of tourists. And for instance, if you see the what I called here authentic life seeker, which is more the young traveler who tries to immerse in city life, who tries to not being a tourist, but being a part of a city, at least for some time. And this seems to be a very sustainable way of traveling, but again, caution, because I think this is also the type of traveler who uses this Airbnb market, who tries to not live in hotels, etc. And as we see in discussions, for instance, in Barcelona at the moment, this rising Airbnb culture, so to say, together with rising housing prices, etc., or enforcing rising housing prices, is a big problem. And one of the elements of tourism, this is contributing to over-tourism and to self-destructing tendencies. So again, I cannot go into detail here much more.
Yes, Peter,
yes.
I will kindly ask you to go to the conclusions, because we are very well behind schedule. So please.
Okay, so I shorten
sorry to very interesting. Sorry to interrupt you, but just to keep a pace.
Yes, I have only 3 or 4 slides left. I will be very quick. This is I think familiar, the exponential growth that we have in tourism since the 1950s. And what is interesting here is the shift from the European market to the Asian market. But what's also interesting here in respect to our discussion is the 2 discontinuities in 2001 and in 2008, the 9/11 event and the financial crisis. And we see here the very fast recovery. The decline in 2020 will be much harder. It will be about 50% after estimation that we have here. Between 40 and 70% are actual figures that are discussed. But from a recent study in Germany, we know, for instance, a study during the Corona crisis, that not very much has changed, at least with German tourists. They say they plan holidays for about 75%. Maybe the amount of people planning holidays in Germany is a bit higher, but still 10% in Italy, 10% in Spain, like in previous years. So it seems there are many signs, also air transport companies, travel agencies, who expect a full recovery until 23, 24. So in my view, the question is more, and this is my conclusion now, well, Corona alone, we should not discuss the effects of Corona. We should see that after Corona crisis, or independent from the Corona crisis, we have other crises. We have climate change crisis, we have the dysfunctionalities within the tourism system, and they of course will stay also when the Corona crisis is over. COVID-19, Corona, is for me not a game changer, but it is a trend accelerator, and we know the trends. I don't mention it here to shorten it, but it is climate change, digitalization, individualization, social inequalities, etc. So there are trends. We could go into each of these details to see how Corona might reinforce such trends which were there before Corona and which are there after Corona. So cultural tourism, of course, is basically a sustainable tourism from its idea, because it's connected to the safeguarding of the past for the present and the future. And this is another word for sustainability. But the system itself, the tourism is not sustainable, and we have to look at the elements, how to make it sustainable. Transport, especially air transport, is one of the big issues. And this can only be done by cooperation and integrated concepts. So besides of efficiency, we need sufficiency. We need a different kind of tourism. Let's discuss about this. Over-tourism is can only be tackled by holistic, integrated approaches, which is not just focusing on Venice, but which has to have a much wider scope. And in particular, of course, we have to deal with day tourism, which in my view is the most critical point in over-tourism these days. Very important for me, we need social consensus. We should not discuss it bureaucratic. But if you look, for instance, at the discussion again in Barcelona or so, if you don't have the whole population, the whole local system behind you, then you cannot have tourism. Tourism is a very complex setting, and you need the people, the inhabitants who live there involved, otherwise it will not function. There are different things how integrated policies can be done, integrated packages like tourist routes or so to guide, to lead tourists into places which are maybe more favorable from a systematic view, is only one of the points which could be discussed in this point of a more global and integrated tourist management approach. So thank you.
First of all, I want to thank the opportunity to be here. It is a pleasure. It is a moment to review some friends, but it's also a nice time to interchange ideas and to discuss very, very important topics in the moment. I want to thank to the organization, and in special to Maria, that is a winner in this difficult year for everybody, but especially for her. I want to share my, okay. First of all, the organization asked me to present the project, and in fact, I will do it in a very short time because it was a very large project. And I tried in the last 5 minutes to introduce some discussion, some challenge related with COVID time and which is the future. This project, I had a participation, but it was led by Special Foresight, by Eric Lawson, and it was produced, the final report is from the last year. It was a large consortium, and the topic emerged, and emerged why. And the question of territorial specific geographic specificities are important, as you saw by the reference in the article 174 of the treaty, and you see how is important in the paragraph, because we try to reduce disparities. And there are some territories that are least favored regions. So the objectives of the project, very fastly, is to improve our knowledge about territorial development in these territories, and to provide some inputs to to have a better convergence of local, regional, and national entities linked to European economic interests. The project is organized by two complementary approaches. One is thematic and the other one is more looked for the territories. And in the thematic, I will only have time to make a small reference because it's very short about the topic sustainable tourism. And in fact, we have here 4 transversal axes, but we link it to these transversal axes. The team had the modules, different modules with different topics that cover the different specializations, not only economic, but also social and environmental. And the governance was also included in the transversal perspective. Which territories? That's why it's important the presentation of the project. I suppose the organization thought about that, because these 4 categories are mountain areas, islands, sparsely populated areas, and coastal areas. This is the identification of the territories from the left to the right and down. You have the mountains, you have the highland, in the right, the sparsely populated, and then in the down, you have the coastal. As you see, some of the territories are coastal and they're very near, have also some mountain characteristics. In synthesis, it's possible to produce something, key issues and key challenge. And the sustainable tourism is in 3 of these territories, specific territories, mountains, coastal, and islands. And is not so evident in sparsely populated areas, but there are many examples in Europe where these sparsely populated areas have also linkage to sustainable, to tourism activities and as a key issue. And what is related with this sustainable tourism comes from the climate change. So we are talking about very exogenous or transversal topics to other ones that are more related with the territories, like demographic change, or like the markets, or the question of connectivity. And you find, and some topic, one other topic that have emerged, it was the residential economy as a key issue in some of the territories that were studied. Key challenge. A key challenge, we see that I only highlight some of the topics naturally, but the question of coordination and the question of multi-level governance, and this is very important in a transversal way for the 4 types of territories. It's very important to discuss this. That means, and then very shortly, I choose this relations that could be highlighted in a very big list that were presented in the project. That is the connection between cohesion policy specific objectives and of course the specifics, the geographic specificity. And there are proposals for the other specific objective, but I highlight only one. Is one that is more linked to the topic of the day, the cultural heritage and the question of environment, social environment, economic development. And when we look at these issues that emerge and that could be connected with cohesion policy objectives, we see again the importance of the governance. So we have new times, but with the cohesion program period for 21-27, but we have all receipts and all needs and all things that we must look at inside and to see how that it is possible to improve the model of governance adequated with this territorial specificity, this geographic specificity, and this also with these territories that are different and they have different models of governance inside them. The second big topic, group of topic is again linked with place-based of course, respective local strengths of local economies, emphasize local residential context, and look at the value of the residential economy. And naturally related with that, we can find a challenge to integrate a circular residential economy in these territories that naturally, and the previous presentation show us the decline of employment, the decline of product, and as a driver. So the traditional receipt, we look at it, now it's time to discuss a little bit about challenge in COVID time. We can look at for these 4 territories, but also for the others. I don't speak too much related with the big cities or to urban, to the metropolitan areas, because I suppose there are presentations of projects that are more linked to that. But naturally, these 4 typologies of territories and the traditional receipt was looking to cultural heritage, not only as asset, but in an integrated way. Asset is in an integrated way. And the driver of the development in almost these territories, as we have opportunity previously to learn, is the employment. We look at that employment and we look at that product, and this way we look at that income. So in the left side, we have all the sectors that are direct and indirect to tourism, but maybe during these times, during this COVID time, we must look more inside to the right part of this slide, looking more to the industrial development, to handicraft, to the cultural activities, to the rehabilitation, building, construction. That means that we could maybe invest more in the transition and think more related with other sectors to rethink the tourism and to rethink the opportunities of the tourism. And we have threats, of course, to these territories. They're the question of connectivity is very important, because now in these times, of course, many of the problems of access have been exacerbated. The fear of the people to go out is increasing. But as Peter Chorntal said, maybe this is for 2 years, for 3 years, we are in a changing time. But we have also opportunities, because some of these territories are now more near to be discovered by the urban environment, to the proximity. So maybe we have to rethink how to capture these new visitors and how to integrate this in a strategy for employment and integration of these territories. So we have a big challenge, because we have by the left side smart specialization strategies that if they will be like in the last period, maybe they were not so quite well integrated in the management structure and in the territory. So we must improve efficiency in the way that we integrate smart specialization strategy in these times, in the short and medium times. And the other challenge is also to think how to integrate all these in the cohesion policy objectives. And we have been discussing the importance of digital transformation. We have also been discussing the perception to change the perception of cultural heritage as a resource. That will be very important, and digital could help us to change this perception of cultural heritage. And that is important for medium and long time, not only to short time. And there is a list here, but if you look at the last 3 linkage, it is between natural, cultural, tourism, health. We must rethink how to link this in these times with these specific territories that have potentialities to develop this connection, and also link it to Green Deal, food, agro, sustainable consumption of proximity, cultural heritage, and some tourism that could come from there. And that leads me to think about if it is time to think about proximity, decline a dependency sector, so improve diversity, and to insist in creativity. And maybe with these things, we win some time. And that what means to me to win some time? We need to growth or we need to change. So maybe now we can have a look for change and wait for the time of growth, because we have to prepare the territories for digital transformation, to integrate energy transition, to integrate the question of circularity. So maybe we have to rethink how to do this to valorize cultural heritage and to keep more new activities and new tourism. And thanks a lot.